Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kevin McPherson. It's HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Hope everybody had a great extended long weekend. Here we are, Tuesday, May 27th. Um, and you've got the start of summer session one. You had players moving on to campus. You had the big news yesterday, not only that Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas had arrived on campus, but you also got the Carter Knox news that he's coming back to Arkansas, which was expected. We've talked so much about that at various times, brought, kind of intel on where things stood with that. Did the staff already know? Had they been told he's coming back? About a week ago, we told you no, but that no one was worried about it. No source I've ever had says Carter Knox is getting drafted or staying in. We got the news there. We also came on about a week ago. It's been a few days. Maybe it was later last week, maybe not a full week, but I had some intel on Adou Thiero in terms of the staff's perspective. If you remember, I think the day before was when Matt Norlander of CBS Sports put out his kind of surprise message at the end of a podcast he did about thinking Carter Knox and Adou Thiero were both headed back to Arkansas. And you've seen Adou Thiero, I think a day or two before that, had been quoted as saying, well, the door was nearly closed, maybe not all the way, and the people in his camp, maybe some people helping him make decisions, weren't quite there yet to fully close that door. So you have all that. You've got Thiero, randomly often posting photos of him, as a Razorback, which doesn't necessarily mean anything other than, he likes himself in the Hog Uni or he, whatever. And we've been consistent. We've told you what the staff said. They did not expect him back. Again, that was just a few days ago, coming directly from Arkansas's coaches. They didn't expect him back. They thought it was, very unlikely, highly unlikely, but they would welcome him back. There's a place for him if he wanted to come back. So even that is not fully definitive when you've got, because we know that Arkansas really put down a nice NIL raise to keep Adou Thiero before he, in the lead up to him announcing and declaring for the draft. So all of that stuff is still, things that come to the forefront of your mind. You're thinking, okay, maybe there is a chance. Maybe there is a chance. So I got this information this afternoon, and this is as soon as I could get on here. So I've been, trying to get some more around this. But this is coming from one source, and man, I love my NBA connections. It's not from the staff, from one of my NBA connections. And they said that they are almost certain that Thiero has a draft guarantee now, that they've got it on good authority that he has a draft guarantee. Now you look at mocks. Mocks don't typically, they're going off conversations, some of these draft gurus that did put these mocks together and trying to figure out where guys might go. Late first round, early second round, you see a lot of that, still some mid-second round for Adou Thiero. And you always wonder, do some of these guys, have they gotten wind of a specific guarantee for a player and they're baking that into that range, or do they don't? They don't, and there's enough feedback to think, well, this is the value, a draft value range for that player. I always wonder that because most of these draft folks that I talk to that put these mocks together behind the scenes, they're not going to really tell you something specific they were told like that, or otherwise they'd blow their source. Kind of the same way I have to operate. So you only get so much information. But having said that, this is an NBA. This is not someone that puts together a mock draft or, trying to, this is someone that's tied to one of the NBA teams. And they're telling me that they've got it on good authority that Adou Thiero has a draft guarantee. Now, this is a second round. What this person has put together is that this is a second round guarantee, and one that would likely come with at least a 2-year guaranteed contract with guaranteed money. He would not tell me where the slot, where the pick order, which selection it is in the order of early second round. That'd probably be too much information, and maybe they would share it if they knew for a fact. I wouldn't share that, which I wouldn't, and I said that, but I didn't get that. So there it is. I got as much as I just gave you. Now, here's the other part of the intel. It's this two-prong. It's that draft guarantee. The other part is several teams, maybe even a handful of teams, have a first-round grade for him, if not for questions with his knee. In other words, if he went back to school and didn't have any more injury problems and had the kind of season he had, and was able to get, show that he's the same guy and maybe obviously improve, but they had first round draft grades for him and felt like those would hold up, barring a setback, if he came back in a year, which I find the kind of information that can cause your representation to maybe pause and think about that, especially if Arkansas is willing to pony up a lot of NIL money to keep Adou Thiero, which they were. So it's not just one piece of information in a vacuum. It's what are the other things we've been talking about that we know? And so I find that very interesting. So he's got at least one draft guarantee. Now that in its second round, and I'm told it would be in a range where he'd get a good 2 year, at least a 2 year, that's kind of in that range of what players get and where whoever's got this out there for him. But I wasn't given, again, the where they're picking, where this team is picking currently, because that would give it away who it is. But at the same time, it also doesn't mean that there's not another team or more than one team making hey, if you're here, we're going to take you. And that could be late first round or somewhere else in a second round scenario. This is just one perspective with knowledge of at least one team that has a guarantee out there. This is a really good source, good information always. And so I believe it. Now, again, if there are also teams saying, look, if not for your knee, we would have a surefire first round grade on you, which, I remember I have an NBA scout that was telling me he didn't have a great grade for Thiero because of lack of skill, but there are teams draft for different needs and different things they like and how they think they'll develop you but the pluses you bring, that they looking more at what you do right and not what you do wrong. So I can buy that. I can buy that there's several teams out there, and you're seeing some of the mocks with late first round grades. So some of these draft gurus are getting some of this feedback. I just wonder, do any of them really have knowledge of a guarantee? In the past, you've seen some of that stuff leak out and get reported by some of the major draft gurus. Not as much lately have I seen that. And you've seen a lot of names come off the board. The deadline's tomorrow. We talked about today being the first day of summer session 1. Players going to be going through physicals, getting on the court, strength and conditioning. All that's about to ramp up after physicals are completed and cleared. Everybody moved it, whatever. Carter Knox back in the fold. Now you're back to 10. Adou Thiero was not expected, hasn't been expected. My percentage has been 95 to 99% that he stays in the draft. I've never wavered on that. Only to say that, if these little things that cropped up that look like, well, maybe there's a chance, you can't 100% close the door on almost anything in this day and age with how quickly things change, shift, and fly against what you thought would be the case. But you're seeing a lot of players with this deadline looming tomorrow, May 28th, Wednesday, I guess up until 11:59 p.m., where players have that deadline, if they have college eligibility, to withdraw to maintain their college eligibility and return to school. So the clock's ticking for Thiero. It seems like it's heading the same way it has been. The staff is where they are with it, that he's not coming back. I think even Norlander maybe has flipped his thought process on that and thinks Thiero's going to stay in. So everybody's kind of believing the same thing. But again, based on this intel, if he's got a draft guarantee and it sounds like it's pretty good, yeah, that's probably a reason. I mean, he's played 3 years of college. This may be the time to go ahead and do it. And, certainly Clutch, they represent a lot of players, and they're drilled down on this stuff too, trying to do what's best for him. But I think if there is any tug of war, it's a couple of things. Arkansas's NIL offers to do Adou Thiero that we've talked about. We said retention was where they put most of the money. And it's partly why you got Carter Knox back. Guys like Trevor Brazile, who they maybe lowballed early. Remember that reporting? Well, that was at the time they were throwing a lot of money at Thiero to stay. So I guess they got right obviously with Brazile. He never even entered the portal. DJ Wagner, Billy Richmond III, all these guys got big raises. Thiero certainly would be someone they would maybe raise. I'm assuming whatever they have out there, maybe they're willing to go a little bit more if it's enough to sway him to come back and maybe build for a first round. Usually the older players are, and the longer they stay in college, typically it doesn't really help move the needle for them. Even if they produce more, but he produced at such a high level. You think, well, that's risky. First, your injury, you don't want to risk getting hurt again, and now you really don't have a pro opportunity dries up for you, or maybe you have an off year and produce less, and you slip a little bit. So that's very risky. To me, based on what I was told today, I think it seems more likely that he goes ahead and just stays in, and it happens like we think it will. But I thought it was very interesting information because now I know that he's got a guarantee. I know that at least this one's not first round, so it's not as good as that. And there are teams saying, "Look, we see you as a first round value, if not for some unknowns, maybe with the knee." Not saying that from what I can gather and the way it was told to me, it's not like these teams think that there's something wrong with his knee. They would like more assurances. I remember Isaiah Joe, similar thing. Some of the feedback he got when he had his guarantee was about his knee. And other teams, there were at least, as I recall, there were 2, maybe 3 teams that said, if not for your knee injury, we would take you in the first round. That was a real thing at that time. So you always have to wonder, what's good enough to stay in, and what's a carrot to maybe, come back to school for a year. Again, I'm still at 95 to 99% that he stays in. So, but this is interesting because it's information in real time as we get to this deadline. And I don't know that anybody has confirmed. I don't know that I've seen it from any of the national guys or anybody that he has a guarantee, only that he's looking for that. He's one of about 5 or 6 major top billing kind of players that still could come back or have that decision, have that deadline tomorrow like he does. He's in that group. You saw PJ Haggerty pull out, the Memphis guard. He ended up at Kansas State. That seemed like an interesting development, and how that ended. I don't know that how much he really helped himself doing what he did, but there it is. I mean, Yaxel Lindenborg, who we talked so much about, and in some of these mock drafts was getting late first, early second round projections, he's out. He apparently didn't get the kind of guarantee he liked. So he's going to be off to Michigan, where they loaded up on the front line again. Probably going deeper, a mix between what they had last year with Wolf and Golden, but adding even more to it, kind of like Florida's blueprint, just loading up on the front line. Speaking of Florida, we said it the other day when Boogie Flan committed to Florida, and we came on here to have a reaction show. And I said, look, if they get Alex Condon back, he's still in the draft. If they get him back, look out. This is going to be a top 5 ranked preseason team, maybe number 1 for some, and maybe one of the teams talked about as a contender to repeat as a national champ. Well, Condon out of the draft and back to Florida. Darion Williams came back to school, got out of the draft. This was a few days ago. The hog killer for Texas Tech in the NCAA tournament, and he's moved on now to NC State, where Will Wade is, and build. That to me checks a box for NC State. I've been saying all along, I'd like to see in that ACC SEC challenge that Arkansas will host this year, expected to host in the 3rd year of it. You alternate home and away typically, so this should be a home game. I've been saying North Carolina, Louisville. I honestly wouldn't mind North Carolina State. I think that's going to be a preseason top 25 team. It's Will Wade. Plenty of storylines, a former SEC coach. With Calipari's rich history, not always being, the shiny perfect angel over in the corner. Will Wade certainly has his share of that. There's plenty of storylines there. I don't think they're tired. I think now that Will Wade's back in the high major level in the ACC and at NC State, where he can recruit and win, I think that'd be a great matchup. But the point is, to circle back, is you've seen a lot of high quality guys that we're getting some draft grades similar to what we see in these mocks for Thiero that have come back, and they're getting really good NIL. And I know Arkansas has got a really good NIL offer. So right now, barring getting intel that, hey, this is a really tough decision right now. He's strongly considering coming back. I have not heard those kind of words from anybody. When the Arkansas staff tells me they think he's staying in, again, I mentioned it the other day, what they've told me is what's played out. Now, one of the things I brought up, the conspiracy theorist in me, is what if they don't want to oversell it? They think their chances maybe are better, and they're working on it, and they just don't, they want to ride with what it looks, what everybody thinks for now until they get it figured out here approaching this deadline, plus trying to get Knox back. Now that they've got Knox back, they could. I mean, so you just never know. But I'm still where I was. I haven't changed that. 15 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. I've still got Adou Thiero likely staying in. And now I'm told he does have at least one draft guarantee. So, source I trust. That's the news. Let's move on. Let's get on to some other stuff here. When I was in Memphis weekend before last, we brought a lot of player names in the class of 2026. I kind of spread that out over 3 different episodes that I did on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. One of the things that the first segment was a Sunday segment, went through the bulk of the names, and some of the names you've heard over and over again, especially some momentum maybe that Arkansas is going to get some visits. Then we brought some names that have kind of older, but back on the radar, some you hadn't heard. That was the next one. We spent a lot of time talking about the big man, Dion Arafan, the 7'1", 285-pound center, who, by the way, not only is Arkansas prioritizing, we talked about that, and then I brought you intel that he told me that he is visiting Arkansas in September, and then we walked through what happened last year during football season and visits and these kind of things. But since our reporting and bringing you all that information, he's picked up 2 significant offers and maybe more. I did not check before I came on to see if there's anything new for him, but he got a big offer from UConn just a couple of days ago in Danny Hurley. Iowa before that. I told you when I really started talking about him again how much the Arkansas staff really likes him. It's why they're prioritizing he's going to get a visit. And he's the #1 rated center in the country, Arafan, 22nd in the country. And the #1 center according to 247 Sports. So overall, the 22nd top best player and the top rated center. Okay, so we went through a lot of that. I won't run back all through the other names. We'll bring some more of those back up in the next few segments as I bring more intel on when visits might happen for those, because I'm starting to get some good information. But one name I want to bring up, we're going to dial the clock back. This is relevant for multiple reasons. When you hear me say this is one of the top guards in the class of 2027, you're going to say, why are we talking about that? I'm going to tell you why. Because it's Anthony Black's brother, Beckham Black, who I've been covering along with Anthony since they were in high school. And Anthony Black, this kid would be, I guess you call a sibling, following a sibling, a legacy, like you do a parent, whatever. Beckham Black is a young man that I've seen play multiple times in person. Obviously watched some of his live stream stuff, but when he was in the King Cotton Holiday Classic as a starting guard, as a freshman, a 9th grader for Duncanville, that's a powerhouse in Texas, one of the top, public schools in the country. When you look at basketball, it has been in recent years, partly due to a guy like Anthony Black, who went on to be a 5-star one and done, a lottery pick, already putting together a solid pro career. When I was in Memphis, AB has 2 teams on Nike circuit. A class of 2027, which is his brother, and his brother is on that team, AB Elite, and then they have the 15U, the class of 2028. So he's already got, Anthony Black already has 2 teams on the circuit. Well, when I was out there, bumped into AB and he pulled me aside and said, hey, let's go sit down over here. So we did a sit-down interview courtside during a game. I put that interview out on Twitter, got that video out, but we talked about a lot of stuff. It's always great catching up with AB. Just a great person in addition to being a great player. The family's great. Mom, Jennifer, good relationship with her. But sitting down with AB and he's answering stuff about the Calipari era and going through stuff. And all that was on camera. About a 2-minute interview. If you didn't see it, you can find that on my Twitter. That was from a little over a week ago. But when we were off camera, I brought up Beckham. I'm like, man, Beckham. And I did ask him about Beckham on camera, just about, is he challenging, that kind of thing. But when we were off camera, I said, Beckham's growing. I mean, the last time I saw him in Pine Bluff when he was a high school freshman, he was about 5'11". I don't even think he was 6 feet tall. Now he's up to 6'3" and still growing. And when you watch him play, I put out one highlight from the EYBL session in one of his games where he made one of those just smart passes and just right on time, right on target, set a teammate up for an easy score. And we know that's one of the superpowers that Anthony Black has. They just make good decisions, and they've got athletic talent. They're great, just in elite court awareness. And then they have the athleticism. They just got a good package of qualities that make them really good basketball players. Beckham Black is now in the top 30 rankings when you look at recruiting rankings in the country. Beckham. And so when I was asking AB off the camera, I said, I know he came in for not we'll call it an unofficial visit, but he attended the Arkansas Oklahoma game at Bud Walton Arena last season, and his mom Jennifer brought him there. She and I had some conversations about how to frame that when I talked about it or tweeted out photos and stuff. They want to be really careful because they respect this idea of, well, do you want to give this idea that the player's actually being recruited by this staff yet? And that hasn't been the case yet. But AB told me, and that was in the season, I guess, was that still January? I think that OU game was at the end of January, and the next game Arkansas had was on the road against Kentucky, and that was February 1st. So, yeah, it was late January. So here we are. Kid continues to grow, right? He's shooting up, really good basketball player. And I asked AB off camera, I said, what is the interest level in Arkansas for your brother? And he just big old smile and goes, we'd like for that recruitment to happen. So I can tell you right now, there is interest from Beckham Black in Arkansas. Eric Patrick Musselman, EPM, is recruiting Beckham. That's going to, that's something that that'll be a program that's in the mix there. But I think AB has a great affection for his season at Arkansas. He's a guy that has, been back to Arkansas multiple times. Not to say that there aren't other teams that would obviously there'd be positives for them as well. But I think if Arkansas prioritizes Beckham Black at some point, if Calipari and the staff choose to make him a priority in that 2027 class, here's a guy that could really I think that'd be a situation where it would be advantage Arkansas. I really believe that. And I know the family outside of AB, his mom, they just love what happened here. A lot of the positive stuff. Also, attaches to Eric Patrick Musselman, so I don't, downplay that, I guess. But I think, and this is obviously Calipari recruits at the highest level. But by the way, Beckham Black, it was announced today, was named one of the 12 player members of Team USA junior national team that's going to participate in FIBA play, 16U, under 16 this summer, which is, that's elite. He's among the best players in the country in his age group. Not just the fact that he's ranked top 30, but Team USA brought him in and he tried out and made the team. So 12 players on that 16U team. He's one of them. CJ Rosser, I talked about him on one of the previous segments, ranked top 3 or 4 in that same class, 2027, out of North Carolina. Calipari and Chin Coleman were both courtside to watch him play while I was in Memphis. I reported on that. But here's when you look at, so he's also on this Team USA Junior National U16 group that's going to be playing this summer and representing the red, white, and blue. But Beckham Black, this is not like the kind of player that doesn't bring the kind of qualities, those high-level, top-shelf, and he's a guard. He's a lead guard. I mean, if you're going to pick out any position that Calipari has excelled the most at, it's backcourt players, even though he's had 1 through 5 great success. I'd say lead and combo guards. And the one thing about Beckham Black is he can shoot. He's a better shooter, not only at the same stage, but right now he's probably a better shooter than AB is, who's a pro and has gotten better, but as a perimeter shooter. But that's the one thing about Beckham. He can shoot. He's a great facilitator. He sees everything. These guys play chess out there. They see all the moving pieces and read those situations and make really good plays off of those. Their instincts at both ends are really, really good. I see some comments about a parody account, something I reposted, not sure. Parody account on what? What are y'all talking about? I'm not sure what the conversation is. I try to. Oh, about the SEC departing from the NCAA. Did I put that? I did retweet that. I glanced at it. I was getting ready for this. I saw it. I just retweeted it. It's a parody account. Well, I'll make sure I unretweet that. I'm glad we're not talking about that today. That's not even on my radar. I didn't see it anywhere else. I just saw that, and I guess I did repost it. All right, nearly 25 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. But thanks for pointing that out for me. I appreciate that. We'll make sure to untweet it when I get off air. Unrepost it. You can do those things, you know. But I think the Beckham Black stuff is, really interesting. Not only the quality of the player, but the interest in Arkansas, and he would be, another guy that I think would be in the Calipari's wheelhouse of the kind of player, not only quality, but to keep that Arkansas flow going, if you could, having Anthony Black, previous coaching staff, but if you could get Beckham, if that was someone you're interested in from that class of 2027, and I don't think it's an accident that his mom brought him in for a game against OU. That's a good vibe for me in terms of, maybe the staff having an eye on him as well. I don't think they just showed up without Arkansas being aware of that in a positive way and welcoming something like that. All right, nearly 26 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. The last thing I want to talk about, this is one of the things that we were going through the Knox stuff yesterday and had kind of a reaction show to him coming back. To me, this firms up. You saw a lot of those top 10, top 10, 8, 9, 10 rankings for Arkansas. It was all based on Knox coming back. And then you see some polls that considered him coming back and still had Arkansas ranked 19th or 20th. So wherever you land with it, the last Lenardi projection had Arkansas as a 4 seed. They'd moved up a seed line. So the NIL offer, someone's asking me about the NIL offer exceeding a second round. Not necessarily, because in 1 year it might for the first year. But like Jalen Williams, he got picked 34th. He had a draft guarantee. He stayed in the draft. He went through workouts, combine, because he was trying to actually improve on the guarantee that he got, so he didn't shut anything down. But his guarantee ended up being $4 million. This was 3 years ago, $4 million over the first 2 years. So the thing is, it's not just about the money. That's a big part of it. But it's also about how much flexibility can you get for yourself? How much can you front end guaranteed money? And then also you have to realize you are leaving behind the college game, which is a different sport almost, and you get to work only with pros to work on your craft, and you're closer to a second contract by doing it now. So there's other things that go into it, not just the amount. What's good about NIL, though, is that for guys that would leave to get even a two-way deal and get their pro career started, or maybe take the risk of staying in, not having a guarantee with NIL, it removes, it does help the schools with retention. And so, if Arkansas can step it up, and they were stepping it up, but maybe there's more they could do to salvage this. I don't know. I threw it out as a possibility. I have no intel on what they're doing there exactly. I don't, other than I had intel before he declared for the draft that they'd really stepped up NIL for him to retain him. I did have that. Right around the same time we were hearing big numbers for Keyshawn Hall, Nate Ament. There were some things in play there. JJ, so anyway, we're talking about the Carter Knox, and does this firm up expectations? And we've talked about you need more depth. You could use more perimeter shooting, all that. We went through some of this yesterday. But I still believe, based on what Arkansas has now, 10 with Isaiah Sealy and Kareem Martell, big question marks on what kind of impact and role they have. So you're really right now in 8 deep. I still personally think you need to add at least one more. We talked about how that could work out. But there will be more portal players, players that are in the portal that back out of the draft. There's international guys that are still making decisions to come over and play in the United States in college. And you're going to have reclass possibilities from 26-25. Now, I brought all that up. So there's some paths here. But I think now that everybody's on campus and summer session 1 starting, you're about to start your limited stuff, and you got Knox back. Now the last chapter, I was bookending the Thiero intel. We're going to know soon enough by tomorrow. Maybe we learn later today, but by tomorrow, even if it's late, before we find out. Jordan Walsh went to the last minute. Maybe I'll talk about that someday. That was an interesting, the way that one ended. So many of them were. under the previous regime. But we'll know tomorrow. And so once all that dust is settled, you'll know about more players that didn't stay in the draft, whether Thiero does or not. If Thiero comes back, Arkansas is done, and that's a top 5. I put him up there with Florida, top 5 preseason. I said this before, with a shot at being one of the contenders to not only preseason favorite to win the SEC up there with Florida, maybe Kentucky, maybe one or two others. Arkansas is going to be in that conversation without Thiero, maybe just a little on the outside looking in. You get him, and you're right there. You're a centerpiece of that preseason top 5, in my opinion, or real close to it. 6th. I mean, I just with all that retention, if that would happen. But if you don't, there's other pathways to at least add one more. And Calipari's added players late. These were all things I said yesterday. But I think the key is if they add nobody else, and this is what I should have said yesterday, even if they don't add somebody else, I still think this is a team that can make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. As constructed, yes, 3-point shooting frightens me, or lack thereof. We'll see what shakes out and what proves to be real on that. Just looking at it from here, it doesn't look like a great path to be in that 34 to 35% as a team range. Not impossible, but it looks tough, like an uphill climb, and what you see in most of your Elite Eight, Final Four type of teams. But even if Arkansas adds nobody else, and I wish I'd have said this yesterday, it's what I want to feel. I think the expectations are fair that as constructed with a true 8 deep, and we'll see with Sealy and Artel again is 9 and 10, barring just a complete miserable flop with your shooting and then injuries and the kind that this time you can't get better, less is more, barring those things as constructed, there's ifs for every team coming into it. I mean, even Florida, with returning all that front line and getting Boogie and Xavier and Lee out of the Ivy League in the backcourt, they lost Walter Clayton Jr., 3 other guards that were in their top 4 guard rotation. They basically replaced all of that. There'll be questions for them and things that'll be pointed out as maybe this group isn't as good in the backcourt as some of the qualities these guys have. Everybody's going to have question marks. But as constructed, I think this roster now, if there's nothing else that comes back to Arkansas in the name of Thiero or some other late addition, I still think as constructed, it's a team that's got the talent, got the all-league potential in a certain amount of players, and enough firepower in more ways beyond just the shooting part, and then we'll see how that shakes out, to make a serious run, and I wouldn't rule out a final weekend run. I think the retention's going to pay off as is, let alone if you got a Thiero back, then you skyrocket in your expectations. You go from 10 to 20 range in rankings to, again, I think a preseason top 5 and in that conversation to win the SEC outright. All right, I got to go untweet that parody account tweet about the SEC moving out, Arkansas, the SEC leaving the NCAA. That would obviously impact Arkansas. Fake news. We don't want that on my timeline. But thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm coming right back on today if we get Thiero news today. Either way, a decision. That's what we're waiting on. I wish I knew it now because I would say what it is, but I don't. But if I don't, we'll be back on tomorrow. We got plenty more to talk about. More high school players, some schedule stuff that I've been asked about multiple times, and I keep intending to talk about it, but there's other stuff pressing right now with all these deadlines happening all at once, moving on to campus, decisions, those kind of things. But until next time, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. See you soon.